Hey, what's up, guys? It's Morgan with Understanding You, and I'm so excited today because the topic is very near and dear to my heart, which is learning to love yourself after childhood trauma taught you to never feel enough. And I'm really excited because my special guest today is Karen Lewis. Let me bring her in here. Karen, welcome.
Hey. Hi, Morgan.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to be talking about this and especially to be talking about this topic with you. So, before we dive in, can you introduce yourself, kind of tell people just who you are and what you do?
Okay, yeah. So I'm Karen Lewis, and I've been foot zoning and doing energy work for almost 12 years. And it's just my favorite thing in the world because I love to put puzzles together. And I feel like people's lives are puzzles and people's emotions are puzzles and figuring out, what makes you tick. And especially with childhood trauma, there's a lot of patterns that we run that are normal to us. And I love it when someone gets the aha of, oh, I can change that. That doesn't have to be so hard. I can love myself more. Oh my goodness, that is a sign that I'm not loving myself, and I can love myself more. I love that kind of thing. Um, I have done several different modalities. One of the modalities that I absolutely love is tapping, and today we're going to talk about inner child visualizations are so powerful, easy and powerful. And so that's my professional. By way of my personal, I have 4 kids. 2 of them are married, one's engaged, and I had Lyme disease, and so did my 4 kids. And so we just finished that. Last person in our family, now Lyme free. And so we're working on the damage that Lyme did, and energy work is to understanding emotions and how they affect our bodies and how they affect us day to day has been a big part of that journey.
Beautiful. Well, I am so excited to have you here. So excited to be talking about this with you. This topic is such a big deal to me because growing up, it felt like I worked so hard at everything I did and felt perpetually inadequate. No matter how good I did on a test in high school, no matter how much my teacher raved about my project, those glimmers of feeling good about myself would immediately be overcome with this haunting feeling of I just don't feel like I'm enough, and I never feel like enough no matter what I do. And so in thinking about and preparing for this video today, I was just like, I want to dive into that, where that feeling comes from, why it's there, and how we learn to overcome that and love ourselves where we're at and with our imperfections and learn to actually feel like our efforts are good enough. So any opening thoughts about this topic before I kind of dive into some symptoms of unresolved childhood trauma?
Yeah, like when you're just talking about that, loving yourself where you're at, because it's so important and it's so empowering too. To not feel like you have to change in order to be able to love yourself. And if your day looks messy, you need actually more love piled on rather than less love. And so loving yourself right where you are, and it's like it's a learned skill.
All right, you're already gonna make me cry. So that is just breaking my brain already because it's just so counterintuitive from what we were taught growing up, is that you have to be a certain way to earn love. And we don't realize not only does that happen with our family, but it happens with ourselves. We think to ourselves, when I do this the right way, when I do that the right way, when I have this accomplishment, then I will give myself love. And it's utter BS. And I'm so tired of living that way. And I'm so glad that I'm learning to not live that way because, like you said, I think we get it in our head that if I love myself the way I am right now, that's wrong because I have these flaws and I should want them fixed before I love myself. But ironically, it's like the best way to actually improve your life is to love yourself. Because if you genuinely love yourself and care for yourself, you will take good care of yourself and you'll naturally move your life forward in like a caring way instead of like a beating yourself down way.
Right. Yeah. And you know what I think is interesting is that even, there's the parenting style, which is a big part of that, right? Like being acceptable as a person versus, hey, you made a mistake. I love you, but like don't hit your brother or don't draw on the wall, draw on the paper, that kind of thing. But also like in school, because I was a good student, and so I was always looking for the A. And then I knew I made it when I got the A. And I didn't mind getting B's except for I really wanted the A. So I feel like even in our school system with the grading, that's one of the ways that we learn that the 100%, then you get a smiley face on your paper,
Mhm.
and like, yeah, you deserve a smiley face when you get 100%. And you also deserve a smiley face when your best is not 100%. So it's parenting and social, parenting and education.
It's so interesting because I think about my kids, right? They're 5 and 2, and I don't think to myself like, "Oh, I'm not gonna love them if they don't, put their shoes away." I'll be agitated, but I'm not gonna stop loving them, but we actually can withhold love from ourselves and withhold acceptance and be punishing ourselves and not even realize that we're doing that. And it shows up, and we'll talk more about it, shows up in these symptoms of unresolved childhood trauma, like forcing yourself to accomplish a lot because you're
Yeah.
trying to earn, your own approval or earn someone else's approval, things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And, and it's interesting, I think, how, if you look at the languages of love, if someone has the language of love of words of affirmation, but mom has the language of love of touch, then mom will touch to share love, but then the child is looking for words of affirmation. So just an example of how, like, yeah, I'm not going to stop loving my child when they make a mistake or whatever the case may be, but the look on my face might present a different story that they are reading. So being clear in our communication as our kids learn what love is and what acceptance is.
That's so beautiful. And being aware of maybe how they're looking to see that we love them because they might be
Yes,
looking for it in ways we don't realize.
right. Exactly. Yeah.
That is so interesting. I saw, okay, kind of a side note. I saw this funny little clip that was like uh your love language, like people like, oh, they all say you have a favorite love language, right? There was this comedian saying this. She was like, but I think your love language is just whatever your partner isn't doing. And I thought that was so funny because I was like, I think I have, like, a primary one, but then also it really does feel like it's just whatever one is being neglected is the one that is yeah, that's my main one, the neglected one. It
That
just
is
kinda
so funny.
that cracked me up.
Yeah, I can see how that would be.
Yeah, so I think sometimes you can be fooled into thinking your main love language is different than what it actually is just because it's getting met in other ways, you know? So, anyway, I just think that's pretty funny, but
Yeah, agreed.
I think being aware of all those different types is very helpful though. Cool. Okay, so the I want to talk about symptoms of unresolved childhood trauma because the whole big picture here, learning to love yourself after childhood trauma taught you to feel not enough, right? We got to get to the bottom of that not feeling good enough, and that's going to be that unresolved trauma. Oops, looks like we lost Karen for a second here. Oh,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
back. No problem. We'll just ride the waves. So symptoms of unresolved childhood trauma. I'm gonna list off a few and then you can comment, you can add whatever, you're feeling. So the first thing I had on the list, of course, was never feeling enough. Um, and addictions and unhealthy coping techniques and numbing out. And I wanted to comment on unhealthy coping techniques that can be like that can even just be shopping too much, eating too much, like watching too much TV. If you find yourself feeling the need to constantly stimulate yourself, it's because you're running away from something. And usually you're running away because there's so much built up emotion that's overwhelming you that you feel like you can't look at it all, that you're trying to self soothe by distracting yourself with TV, with alcohol, with whatever it is. Comments on that?
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think it's interesting that whatever it is, because is there something that if you felt like you had to do without that thing, your life would fall apart or not be as fulfilling, which that can be there's a line there, right? But the whatever it is, buying cute things for the house or just whatever of balance. And when I was thinking about this, how does never feeling enough, or how does anxiety or depression or some of these things, how do they play out in your daily life, in your mind? But and one of the things that I was really thinking about is like, if you have a feeling or a thought and you're scared to say it or feel like you shouldn't say it, then that's a red flag of, like, okay, I need to look at why am I scared to say it?
Or maybe even scared to think it or scared to
Yeah, yeah,
like scared
yeah,
to admit to yourself that you feel a certain way about something.
yeah, yeah. Good point. Yep.
Interestingly enough, it's easy to be hard on ourselves and be like, I do spend too much time on my phone. I do spend, eat too much. I do. And you can get hard on yourself when you realize, like, oh my gosh, I'm making all these mistakes. But I love what Jordan Peterson points out, and he's a popular psychologist. And he's like, people always say, why is it that so many people are doing drugs and addicted to alcohol? And like, why is it that this is happening to so many people? And he's like, there is a substance out there that can take all the bad feelings away or, same with like TV or your phone or whatever. And you're surprised that people are doing that? Like you should be surprised more people are sober that like it's pretty incredible. So, if you notice these things about yourself, don't try to be too hard on yourself. Just acknowledge, like, okay, I'm numbing out. And the reason I'm numbing out is because there's something that I'm having a hard time, getting to deal with. And that's okay. And like, when you're ready, start to look at it and unpack it. Next
Yeah,
up,
Yeah,
Go
let
ahead,
me
go ahead.
just say, Morgan, like the when you're ready part is so important because the more you push yourself to try and, I got to do this better, I got to do this better, but you're mentally exhausted or you don't have all the information yet, you don't have the right tools, whatever the case may be, um, then you're going to just cause yourself more stress and anxiety than if you just like take it slow, pull her on the love, and build yourself up for it.
I love that. I think it's so important to point out because it is easy to be like, I see all these problems now. Now I got to go fix them all right now. But that urgency is your childhood trauma as well, right? And that
Yeah.
urgency is going to lead you to burnout. It's ironic because the urgency can help you address things quicker, but it will also push you into burnout faster. And so the more you can approach this like, I see it and I'm gonna be buckling up for that. That's, I think, a better approach.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
like
like
I
that.
see it. What are the tools that I need
Yeah,
to make this happen? Like what kind of support do I need? What kind of love do I need to pour on myself?
absolutely. A quick example with that was that so earlier this year, I got diagnosed with a whole host of gut uh, infections, and it was an absolute nightmare. And I had to be put on a very strict diet, which I'm still on. And it was soul crushing. And at the time, it was like, I don't have space for anything other than making sure that I don't eat anything I'm not supposed to eat. So there was a lot I knew that I should be doing at the time. I knew I should be working out. I knew I should be like reading more books and I don't know. Like there's just things I wanted to be doing. And I just kept putting it all in the back burner from a place of love of no, right now you focus on your health and that's it. You just focus on getting through this day without eating any brownies and life is going to move on. And I did that until I felt ready. And you know what's cool is now that I've been on this diet for several months, I'm feeling a lot more accustomed to it. It's still really hard, but I'm feeling a lot more accustomed to it, and I actually feel ready to start working out again. And so I'm telling myself, okay, let's once a week, twice a week, whatever I feel like I can manage. Let's get this back on my radar again. And I think, I just love that attitude I had toward it because if I had been so hard on myself while I was in the midst of that diet being like, "Morgan, you're supposed to be working out, like, this is so important for you," I just would have broke with both things, and then you know what I mean? So, I think that in our brains, we always think if I know all these things that I'm supposed to be doing, I have to be doing them right now. But you actually can't do it all right now. And trying to do it all right now will negate any little progress you could have made. So sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to force yourself to slowly move forward, which is really hard for us go-getters. We don't like moving forward slowly.
Yeah, but then in the end, you actually do get to do more, right? Because you're
Yeah.
going at a sustainable pace. Yeah, that I love that realizing that you can't do it all. That is so true. I was in a Facebook group one time where it was like goal oriented, and like I just had this aha of, wait a minute, I can't do everything. And I'm working with four sick kids. I had Lyme myself and I'm working on this goal, and so I put in the Facebook group, I'm realizing I can't do it all. And someone commented, of course, yes, you can, Karen. You can do it all. And it's like, no. I guess it depends on what you have on your to-do list, right? But like there are only so many hours in a day. And like I could not go climb Mount Everest tomorrow. I'm not prepared. I
No.
don't have the snow boots for it, for one thing. So I can't do anything. I can do what I have the resources and the tools for, and if there's something else that I want to do, I can build myself up and get ready for that.
That's perfect. And not only sometimes you don't have the time, sometimes you do have the time, but you don't have the mental energy for it. And that's something that I used to shame myself for a lot because I'd be like, oh, I've got 2 more hours. Like, I should do more cleaning or I should do more reading or I should do more. But at some point, your brain shuts off and you need to rest. Like, you can't do anymore. You can only do so much in one day. And it's so easy to tell myself, well, if I have the time, I have to do it. No, because you might not have the energy, and that's not your fault. I want to quote this one show I've been watching. It's called, gosh, I can't remember the name of it, but it's this really cool show. And this son is having this really emotional moment with his mother, and it's a superhero show. So his dad's a superhero, and he's a superhero, because he's got the genetics, and he's just learned his powers and he's all insecure because he feels like he'll never be as good as his dad, right? So he's having this really emotional conversation with his mom and he's like, I'm never going to be as good as my dad. And she's like, well, why can't you just be, as good as you? And he's like, because
Mhm.
what if my best isn't enough? And she's like, that's ridiculous. How is it that your best wouldn't be enough? And that just ripped my heart out because that is the hell we set ourselves up for when we have this childhood trauma running in the background is it's this voice in your head that's saying your best isn't enough. And that is so unkind to yourself. And so it's this getting real with yourself that maybe you don't like where your best is at, but you can love yourself through that anyway. You don't have to shame yourself. Like, okay, all I have energy for today is ABC. Okay, that's where I'm at. Like, I'm not a bad person because I don't have energy for DEF, right? So yeah, I loved that show so much.
Yeah, okay, so then check out Brent. I love that. That's so cool. Like how can your best not be enough? It doesn't make sense. There may be things left undone, but your best is enough. Okay, and so then Brene Brown says it takes courage to say yes to rest and play in a culture where exhaustion is seen as a status symbol.
I love that because it is when you're feeling so insecure about yourself, you're always trying to prove yourself. And the best way to prove
Yep.
yourself is by all these accomplishments, all this doing, right? Because it's the only thing that you feel like is going to elevate you above all of that shame and insecurity.
Yeah.
But then you're just a slave to accomplishments to feel good about yourself. And it's like, no, no, no. So we gotta reverse this, right? And we're gonna get more into this later. We gotta learn how can I love myself and then go and do good in the world from a place of self-love instead of a place of I have to prove myself to the world.
Yeah.
Ah!
Beautiful.
Okay, we're gonna read a couple comments. Kristen said, love that. Communication differences in feeling love makes a big impact on kids. Oh yeah, back to the love languages. MB said, "Oh my goodness, I had an epiphany about my childhood trauma the other day that revealed to me that I have several of these symptoms." Girl, I'm with you. I've got them too. You're not alone.
Mhm, mhm.
Howdy. It feels like socially we've placed busyness as a status symbol of some sort, and I love that we're learning about what it really takes to make a fulfilling life. Ooh, that is the crux of it all. I loved reading The Awakened Family, if you're familiar with that. Dr. Shafali wrote that book. Incredible, one of my favorite books ever. And in it, she talks about recognizing what your definition of success is and becoming really real about what that is because we often project our definition of success onto our kids, not even knowing what our definition of success is. And it's often career related, money related, accomplishment related. And it's like, that's not the happiest, best life you're going to live. I want my kids to have loving relationships. I want them to have a good relationship with themselves. I want them to have good coping techniques. To me, that's all a lot more of my measure of success now, as opposed to how much they can get done in one day.
I love that. Yeah, what is your definition of success? And like Oprah was talking, I watched a thing that Oprah did, and she was talking about, you know, you define your success. It's not what you think other people think you should do. It's not what other people think you should do. It's what do you want to do, and get really clear on that, and then move forward, and you can get the support, to do that. And that's one thing that illness does, right, is it changes your definition of success. And I think, like, even having kids at home, it changes there are a lot of things that change your definition of success. But like, so my daughter one time, was like the night where you go and show what you did for the year. And she's like, Mom, I don't have anything physical to show. And so we talked about, okay, but what kind of a person are you? You don't have a physical thing to show, but look at how good of a friend you are. Remember when this happened, remember this happened, and different things like that. And I think I would have been a very project oriented mother had I not had to revamp everything, you know?
Absolutely.
And so then what is the success in my day? Because even with kids and with relationships where it's a two-person thing, you again have to be careful about how you define success, because it's not about we had a great conversation, because maybe the other person was in a bad spot.
True,
So
true. Maybe you
redefining
put the
success.
other person in a bad spot. Just
Right?
kidding.
Accidentally or on purpose.
Yep, yep. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. Okay, coming back to the list of symptoms of unresolved childhood trauma: mood swings, anxiety or depression, keeping yourself extremely busy. Um, so we kind of hit on some of this. That keeping yourself extremely busy, that is a twofold thing I like to point out. Is one, I'm avoiding feelings I don't want to feel or issues I don't want to address. And two, I'm trying to feel good about myself. And
Yeah.
so keeping that in mind, and have compassion for yourself if this is you, because isn't that a bummer that you feel the need to get 1,000 things done in one day, or else you feel crappy about yourself? That's a bummer that you feel that way. Like, I'm sorry you feel that way. I don't want my kids to feel that way. I don't want you to feel that way. I don't want me to feel that way. I'm learning how to not feel that way. Thoughts about that?
Yeah, okay, keeping yourself extremely busy. So I used to as soon as I get in the car, turn on the radio, and then, turn it off when I got out of the car. And I was like, I wonder if this is several years ago. I wonder why I do that. I just noticed this pattern. It was just, and so I drove around one day without the radio on, and like the thoughts in my head, I was like, oh, that's why I turned the radio on. Yeah, I see what I'm doing there. And like, yeah, I wasn't beating myself up while I was driving around. But more importantly,
Mhm.
you know, um, okay, I need to revamp my thought pattern. And again, like you're saying, Morgan, if that's you, wrap your arms around yourself and go, oh, yeah, that is hard. Validate, validate, validate. That's hard. It got that way for some reason, and just take the next step of, okay, next time I hear a negative thought about myself, I'm going to say, nuh-uh, and just start there.
Absolutely. Uncle Gary, our BFF, your greatest accomplishment is the love you spread to everyone you encounter. Your family, your friends, even the cashier at the drive-thru spread love and love will return to you. Very fitting coming from Joe here, from Gary. That's, on point
Yeah.
for his character as a person.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, inability to express wants or needs, or maybe even inability to recognize wants and needs, inability to set healthy boundaries. As a kid, if you felt like your needs and wants were very dismissed growing up, maybe because your parents were struggling too much with their own emotions that they felt like they couldn't hear you and see you in the way you needed, you may have learned that it felt safer to actually start to ignore your needs and wants and even kind of disconnect from it on such a deep level that you might not even feel like you have needs and wants because you're so separated from them. And that will lead to a lot of disfulfillment in life and a lot of resentment because there'll be this like, I'm mad at everyone for taking up all my time, but I also don't know what I need and I don't know what I want. So I don't really know how to fix this problem. Just know that the advice we're going to be giving, later here in the video is going to help with all of these symptoms.
Yeah. Nicely put, Morgan.
What if a serious current situation triggers the childhood trauma? Asking for a friend. My favorite questions are always asking for a friend. That is such a good question. Actually, one thing I learned from Karen about this was, thank you, universe, for showing me where I still need more healing on this thing that I really don't want to think about anymore. So sorry to hear that you are being triggered. That is so unpleasant, and especially when it's something that's a very deep wounding. But if you can learn to look at it as a gift and say to yourself, like, okay, this sucks that this is triggering my past really bad, you can look at it as this gift of, but if this is triggering my past, it's giving me an opportunity to heal this a lot deeper. Do you have thoughts about that, Karen?
Yeah, and definitely definitely I agree with what you're saying. Thank you for this information. And one thing that I'll do is interesting. That's interesting that that is triggering me like that. Because you don't have to believe every thought that goes through your head, but situations are help you see where you can become more you than you've ever been before. And so interesting that that takes my peace away. Hmm. I love myself while I experience this lack of peace. Because the biggest thing that throws us out of whack is our judgment about ourselves when we're experiencing something.
Right, right, because it'll be like, "Okay, this thing happened, and now it's triggering me, reminding me of this other thing, and that here comes the shame. I should be over that by now, right? I should be past that now. I shouldn't be worrying about that still." And this is where you gotta try to bring in the compassion, which is really hard to do, but you can learn to do it, and that's where you come in, and let me give you an example. When I lost a friendship of mine recently. It was like a year ago now. When that friendship ended, it devastated me. That friend didn't want to be my friend anymore. We were friends for like 4 years, and it wrecked me because it brought up a lot of insecurities for me. After a while, I got to this point where I was like, I have cried about it enough. I should be over it by now. And I was being really hard on myself. Like, why is this still bothering me? But then I tried to bring in the compassion and said to myself, this bothered me so much that I still need to cry about it. Okay. It's like, instead of, how is it this is still bothering me? This bothered me so much that it's still bothering me, which means
Ooh.
I need to give myself more love and more compassion with this because for whatever reason, this triggered me so bad that 6 months later, it's still really hard for me. So instead of saying to myself, I'm broken because I didn't get over it in 6 months, I'm saying to myself, wow, this really hurt me. It hurt me so bad. 6 months later, I'm still crying. And having that sympathy actually helped me to get over it so much faster instead of fighting myself on it.
Love that. Love that example.
Kristen said, I love the interesting response to an event or trigger. It's fairly neutral. I don't have to be happy or mad. I'm just looking at it more objectively. I totally agree. I love that. How can I give how can friends give support to my friend? Um I think we give support to everyone in the same way. Whether it's ourselves or whether it's someone else, you listen and give hugs. And try not to give advice because usually people don't want that.
Yeah, the cool thing is that you don't have to fix it. You know,
Yes.
a powerful moment with my very best friend in the whole wide world. Was she got some bad news, and I sat on the bed and cried with her. And at the time, it was just like, from my perspective, it was just like, gosh, I'm going to be sad with you because this really is sad. And later she told me that was the best thing I could have done. I did not solve the problem. I couldn't. But just being there with her, validating, understanding. And so then the same for ourselves. And childhood trauma, I think, is like you can have these patterns pop up, even after you've done a lot of healing. And so that I should be over this thing, which, is kind of one of those thoughts that comes to mind in those kinds of situations. Um, really, because like it was a big time of that sponge learning.
Yeah.
And so just sitting and crying with yourself, giving yourself a hug, I love imagining a warm blanket of love wrapped around me,
Yeah.
because it's complete. If it's just arms, and my family gives really good hugs. I love hugs. Okay, but so then when I'm in that, just like, oh, my heart has been torn in two. Just wrapping myself in a blanket of love and just being still in that is so helpful. And
Beautiful.
again, not judging yourself for the way you feel. Just like, wow, like you said, this one just hurts.
And if you do start judging yourself, just acknowledge where you're at, right? I'm feeling sad about this. Now I'm feeling ashamed. And now I'm feeling ashamed that I feel ashamed that I feel sad. Just feel it all. Like this is where I'm at. Okay. Just see the different layers and it will help. Just starting there can be really helpful because it's really hard at first when you're like, okay, I'm trying not to shame myself for feeling this way, but like I feel like I got to shame myself. And it's just like, okay, just see it all. When you can see those different layers of emotions, it can really help. In the
Yeah.
previous video I did, I actually talked way more in depth about that, about meta emotions and layering of emotions. So you can check it out. It's um, gaslighting yourself is like a part of the title. Anyway, next on the list, codependency, over reliance on others, or overly independent. And so it could go either way, right? From childhood trauma, you can get this like, I am overly dependent on someone else for my happiness, or I'm overly independent and I got to do everything by myself. Like, I can't be happy unless my husband is home and making dinner and, whatever. Like, he has to spend all his time with me, or it can be like, I feel like I'm not allowed to ever ask for help no matter what. Those are both two sides of the same coin, right? Of feeling insecure and unworthy from unresolved childhood trauma. And also, I accidentally skipped over inability to set healthy boundaries, which kind of ties in with those as well.
Yeah, good stuff. And you can be over reliant and overly independent.
True, in different relationships, right? You could be over
Yeah,
reliant on your spouse and overly
independent.
dependent on your kids, or like you are over rescuing them. Like you could over rescue your kids, but then your husband's over rescuing you. I'm glad you pointed that. Definitely for me, how it showed up would be like I would expect my husband to kind of save me, but then I was going around like stealing everyone else's problems, like problem stealer.
I love that problem stealer.
Oh yeah. So next on the list was struggling to make or maintain close relationships, fear of what other people think of you, unhealthy relationships. These are all symptoms of unresolved childhood trauma, because if you're struggling to have good relationships with people, it's likely a result of all of this undealt with issues from your past, insecurities, unworthiness, even just beliefs about yourself or about the world or about relationships and how they're supposed to function. That's all
Mm.
going to show up in those ways. The next thing I had on the list was chasing things. And by chasing things, I mean like kind of that whole like go getter of like, I gotta prove to everyone I'm awesome. So like I gotta do all the activities, or I gotta have my kids in all the activities, or I'm chasing a career, or I'm chasing fame, or I'm chasing. It's not bad to want good things for your career. It's unhealthy to need those things. And you'll feel a difference, right? There's a difference between I want to become a veterinarian because I love animals and I'll find it fulfilling, versus I need to do this to prove that I am worth it. So just be aware of how you're approaching your goals, what attitude is showing up for you. And the more desperate you feel to accomplish those things, the more this is actually a coping technique for you and not like a healthy, good desire. Not that it can't be both, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I really like that. Like the desperation that you feel inside, the pressure that you feel inside, those are it versus I'm enjoying this. And then, there's times where like you got to mop the floor, right? And you don't want to, and you got to mop the floor anyway. That feels different than I have to mop the floor so and so will think highly of me.
Yes.
It feels different. And if you don't, and here's the thing, like if you're like, okay, well, maybe I don't understand the difference between that, go mop the floor on two different days with two different motivations. And, you know, how does it feel? Or do something, uh, put yourself in the position safely to experience the difference of the emotions, because then when you have them later you can go, oh, hey, maybe I wonder, is this me needing to prove to somebody or earn love, or yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. The last two things I'll mention on the list is victim mentality, feeling like you need to be rescued, which we kind of already touched on a little bit with codependency, and feeling extremely triggered by any uncertainty or powerlessness. If you have unresolved childhood trauma, nothing will trigger you more than uncertainty. You will hate uncertainty because it will send you spiraling down a well of terror, of imagining how all the things are gonna go exactly wrong. Uncertainty is gonna be a massive trigger for you, and if it is, have compassion for yourself when you're in situations that bring up that uncertainty, and just be aware that this is something that's hard for you because of your background, but you can learn to handle these things better. Um, yes, thoughts about victim mentality or that?
um uh, okay, so one time I noticed that looking at my calendar, and swiping through the weeks was super comforting to me. And, I was like, okay, what's going on? Just ask the question, become curious. That's a big part of the process. Become curious. Why am I doing this? Like, I think I just looked at my calendar yesterday, and nothing's changed, but I realized that knowing what was coming up in the future was comforting to me. But so then in my personal life, with Lyme, it's very unpredictable. It's very unpredictable. And so if there was something that I could know was going to happen, then that felt good to me. And so when I figured it out, then it was like, oh, okay. Well, you know what? For right now, until I work through feeling better about the unpredictability of everything, I'm going to allow myself to look at my calendar. And I am also a person that I like a schedule. I like to be organized. It's fun to me to, organize the cabinets and stuff like that. It's part of my personality. But then when I'm using it as a coping skill, then it's getting a little bit more out of balance. On the other hand, if something's out of order and I wanted to go organize a cabinet and, sweep the floor and whatever, that's a really healthy way to process the emotions. But, it was interesting because I realized looking at my calendar was helping me feel more in control. And so then and I still like to look at my calendar, but it has a different feel to it now.
Okay, I'm laughing over here because you gotta understand where I'm coming from with this. Jared had just recently pointed out to me that I've stopped checking my calendar for like 30 minutes every night, like within the last year. I would get in bed and I would lay there, and just like you, I would pull up my calendar and I would swipe through exactly like you. And it was self-soothing. It was so funny. And you know what's so funny is the more that I create stability in my life internally through like loving myself, through understanding myself, the less I stare at my calendar. And like, it is so funny to me like that we had that exact same experience. And Jared literally just like 2 nights ago was like, you know, you don't look at your calendar at night anymore.
That is
I was like,
awesome,
that's
Morgan.
because
I
I'm healing.
love it.
Okay, Rebecca asked a great question. Having compassion for myself in the moment can be really hard. Is there something simple and small I could do in the moment? Yes, I have a perfect thing for this. So, compassion for yourself feeling really hard usually means there's a block to accepting love, right? And it's usually a self-worth, not for everybody, but I imagine that's going to be most of the cases. My favorite exercise is to, if I'm having a hard time, bullet out very simply why I'm having a hard time. Okay. Lucas peed the bed this morning, and then August did this, whatever. And it made me feel blank. Okay. This thing happened. It made me feel blank. And then you add to it when you're done with the list, you go back with every bullet and you say, it makes sense that I feel that way. And you can add a because if you want. It makes sense that I feel that way. This will bring in compassion because the reason that we have a hard time being compassionate with ourselves is because we're not putting ourselves in our own shoes because of the self-worth blocks. So if I can say to myself, instead of saying to myself, "Oh, I'm just being over dramatic that I'm mad that he wet the bed or whatever." It's like, okay, it makes sense that I'm mad that he wet the bed because then we were late for piano lessons and it made me feel guilty. And then I'm like, oh, okay. Okay, Morgan, I see where you're coming from. It will help pull that compassion in. So it's a very simple exercise, but just writing down, here's how I'm feeling. And then it makes sense that I feel this way because if you want to add it, because this is a very simple, very powerful exercise. Did you have anything to add to that?
No, I really love that idea. And I just reiterate again that interesting that I'm having a hard time even giving myself compassion, like neutralizing that energy. But then that exercise is brilliant.
Instead of being mad at myself, why can't I be compassionate, damn it?
Yeah, exactly.
I like that a lot. Like more of this like observing. I love that. Okay, so let's transition into talking a little bit about the root of unresolved childhood trauma. And we'll just see how far we get. We might just have to pull this into a part 2 for another day, but let's just roll on. So, I want to talk about the root of unresolved childhood trauma because okay, if you're dealing with all of these symptoms, you got to understand where this stuff is coming from so that you can understand how to start shifting it, right? So, the first thing I want to bring up as far as root of unresolved childhood trauma is feeling abandoned or disconnected from your parents or family. This doesn't necessarily mean that they physically left you, right? It might just mean that they were not emotionally available for you to meet your needs, not enough to meet your needs, right? Which, to be fair, is really hard. It's really hard now that I'm on the parenting end of it. It's really hard to be there for kids for their emotional needs all the time, especially when you're struggling to be there for your own emotional needs. So, feeling abandoned or disconnected from your parents or family, this will cause a lot of chronic problems for you that will lead to a lot of those symptoms, right? Because what you're going to start internalizing as a child is I have to push my needs and wants away. I have to dismiss these things. I have to not need and want things, or I have to try to deal with these things on my own. But at that age, you're often too young to know how to cope healthily, especially if your parents aren't coping healthily, you don't know how to cope. So then you're going to be very over reliant on negative coping techniques, which you got to give yourself a hug for because those kept you alive, probably. Because eating Oreos is a better healthy not health is a better coping technique than doing nothing, right? You'll
Yeah.
just explode.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And there are so many different ways like you can go to anger, for years because that puts you in that fight mode to help you get through.
Yeah.
Or food or just like so many things. But then like when you get to the point of realizing what's going on and you want to change the pattern, then part of the process of that is writing a letter to anger or to food or to depression, even what or anxiety, whatever it is. Thank you for helping me get through that time.
You know what's funny is I have an example with this is that I haven't eaten an Oreo probably in years. I can't remember the last time I ate an Oreo because I over the last couple years I've eaten a lot healthier even though now I'm really strict. But Oreos have been coming to my mind lately, and I can't get them out of my head, and it's funny because it's like I haven't even had an Oreo in years, and so, like you said, I've been almost, like, having these conversations with Oreos in my mind of, like, what is this symbolizing to me? What does this mean? And the only thing I can think of is just, like, it just felt really comforting, and it felt like, it just comforted me at the time, and I think because I'm having such a hard time with other things in my life, I'm trying to draw on something that I knew brought comfort. And so I'm just like letting myself miss and love Oreos as much as I want to while not eating them. Like, and just being like, "Okay, I still miss Oreos. Okay, alright, that's alright. Like, what can I get you instead? Would you like some beef jerky?" We could pretend it's an Oreo. Could dip it in some butter.
I love it. Yeah.
So talking more about the root of, unresolved childhood trauma, I think, it was so beautifully put in a book I most recently read, which was Anxiety RX, and it's by Russell Kennedy, right? probably favorite book ever. And he essentially says that the root of a lot of these issues is a separation from yourself. So here's what happens. You're a child, right? And your parents are your lifeline, right? So you're trying your very best to stay connected with them in whatever way possible. And what will happen is that if your parents are unhealthy or suboptimal or struggling with their own stuff, you will start to abandon yourself in order to please and take care of them because you feel like your survival is reliant on them. You're more worried about them being happy than you are about you being happy. And you also will lie to yourself and think that if I make mom happy, then she'll take care of me finally. Then she can be there for me finally. And that's super sad, right? So I love his description though here of what happens is that as a child, you start learning to abandon your own needs, your own wants, your own opinions or thoughts or ideas in order to try to salvage what you can in this unhealthy relationship with your parents. And as a result, you end up having all of these chronic internal issues like anxiety, like depression, like worrying about what everyone thinks, because you ultimately feel so disconnected from who you actually are because you've been trying to be whoever it is your mom needed you to be or your dad needed you to be or wanted you to be or was expecting you to be.
Yeah. Okay. So I love the, like what you think people want you to be. The Okay. So this one day I was like, oh, I need to do this so they will think this. And I was like, oh, Karen, whoa, hold the door. Like, what is that about? And, and again, getting curious of what's going on here. And I thought about it and I was like, actually, it's more about this is the kind of person that I want to be. So, just restating, I want to do this because that's what I want to do. In my
Yes.
head, it was reading because I want to please them. But the reality was, it was because of the kind of person that I wanted to be. Thought that was super interesting. So, another thing when those thoughts are going through your mind, you might be able to do the same thing you were going to do just from a different motivation, which is so freeing.
I love that. I love that. Okay, next I had more on the root of unresolved childhood trauma. Feeling unloved, unwanted, unheard, misunderstood, or insecure in your childhood, which is just kind of building what I already said. All of those things are going to cause you to just not feel like you know who you are, not feel like you know what you want, not feel like you know how to how to create the life that you want because you're going to feel so lost and desperate to fill these needs and that desperation's going to leave you in unhealthy toxic relationships. Another thing I listed was worthiness issues learned from parents' mistreatment, which interestingly I think that the damage in our childhood really comes not from the poor treatment or neglect from our parents, but what the poor treatment leads you to believe about yourself. It leads you to believe you don't deserve to be treated well. It leads you to believe you maybe even deserve to be treated badly or that you deserve um, these these bad things that are happening to you, and it's so so sad, right? So if you have a kid that their parents were really abusive toward them, that damage is them thinking their whole life that that was okay and that that was normal and that they deserved it because a child doesn't know how to separate in their mind that their parents are fallible, that they can make mistakes. So a child will internalize this as I'm the one that's doing something wrong. And I actually have a perfect quote with that from that book I mentioned by Russell Kennedy, Anxiety RX. I'm going to read that quote. When children experience trauma in their family, they often blame themselves. Perhaps this is because to blame the parents would be a threat to the child's survival. That is, the child can't see a parent as fallible because the child needs to see the parent as competent and reliable because their survival is imperative for that. Because the problem cannot be seen as the parent's fault, the child assumes the blame, which gets poured directly into their background alarm. And for him, that's childhood trauma, anxiety. That's what he refers to as background alarm. There is a sad saying about this. If a parent mistreats or abandons a child, the child doesn't stop loving the parent. They stop loving themselves. When you stop loving yourself, that is too much for you to bear. So the negative energy is pushed out of your direct awareness of your mind into the background alarm of your body. When you start to see the alarm you feel is not an enemy to be defeated, but a younger version of you that deserves compassion, the whole game changes. I love that quote so much. I feel like it sums up perfectly the most effective healing I've ever experienced in my life. And I've been on this healing journey for 10 years now, trying, and it all started because I was so anxious and I was having so many panic attacks. And there's nothing that has been more helpful to me than what he's saying right here, which is loving those different broken parts of you into well-being. And so that is a perfect segue into you explaining some tips for healing unresolved childhood trauma, which is self-love exercises. And so would you like to explain kind of specifically that one where you do it like different ages of your life? That is so powerful.
Sure. Yeah, and it's really fun, like doing this for myself and feeling the difference that I feel inside, and then also doing it with clients and them coming back and reporting their experience. It's just so powerful. Okay, so this is, I call it the inner child visualization. Super, it says right in the title what it is, inner child visualization. So you're going to think back to a time where you're feeling unsafe or unsecure, sometime in the past. And then ask yourself, how old was I? What age was that? And it's okay if it's not exact, but I was 4 or 5. Okay, good enough. Um, okay, so how else did I feel? Maybe I felt scared, embarrassed, irritated, angry, whatever those feelings are, just go through them in your mind. Then go and take yourself to that, we'll say 5-year-old, and we'll use me as an example. And I would say, Karen, what is it that you need? And the interesting thing is, because like your spirit knows what you need. And if you take the time to sit and ask the question and then take the time to listen, you'll have a thought come to mind. And like the first time you do this, it can be like, okay, this is really weird. Okay, that's okay. Weird just means it's something new. That's okay. Keep going. So maybe my 5-year-old says, I just need a hug. Okay, so I'm going to imagine giving that 5-year-old a hug. And then I'm going to say, what else do you need? And then she say, maybe, like, but I'm so sad. I just want to cry. Okay. And a big part of this too is valid. So, if you want to say, well, that's valid, or if you want to say, I understand, or that makes sense,
Mhm.
whatever the verbiage is that means the most to you, let's sit here and cry together.
And I just want to point out really quick, before you keep going, why this exercise is so powerful. Because what you're doing is you're going back in time and validating the big emotions you never processed as a 6-year-old. that is causing you to feel all sorts of stressed out and insecure and alone right now, because that is still living with these emotions. They don't just resolve themselves. You have to actively resolve them, or you'll just keep piling things up, right? So the beauty in this is you're basically going back in time and validating a younger version of you's emotions, processing those emotions, and then letting it go so that it's not taking up all this emotional energy in your daily life anymore. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. So you keep asking, your 5-year-old, whatever age self, what else do you need? What else do you need? What else do you need? Valid. Let's do that. Um, until what happens is like, well, I just want to go play, or I want to go camping, or I just want to go, like they get to the point where they feel more carefree. Okay, let's go play. And that's when you get to that point of like, I just want to go play, then you can just like watch you and them just go off and do whatever they're going to do. And
Yeah.
that's where it wraps up. But being heard, being heard. Most people, people crave feeling understood. So the cool thing that I absolutely love about love is that you are with yourself, and it's free to to learn to love yourself. Like, and the, parenting your inner child, is one of the catchphrases, right, of this process. So that's what you're doing, kind of parenting your inner child or loving your inner child. You're right there. You can do it. And you can learn how to do it. If you haven't ever done it before, just go back through the script and, but you're available for yourself.
Yeah.
Your mom might be busy. She might be healed and ready to talk you through it on the phone, but maybe she's busy. But you're right there with yourself.
And this is where so much of the beautiful healing really happens, because you cannot fix insecurities any other way other than
Yeah.
internally. It can't come from an achievement, a label, it can't come from a class, it can't even come from a book. It has to come from yourself. And it's really hard, but there's no other way to do it, right? And
Yeah.
what I've noticed in doing exercises like this is that I start to feel more and more whole, and the internal voice in my head becomes kinder and kinder. It's like I go from, instead of being hard on myself for not going to the gym, like you guys heard, I'm like, "That's okay, Morgan. You're having a hard time. Don't worry about the gym right now. We're gonna get you there when we've got a better handle on this diet." That's very self-loving. That's very self-empowering. And it's very much this attitude of like, I've got my own back, right? And that's what starts to happen when you start to take care of yourself. And like, I had a lot of issues, especially like in my early years of marriage, just feeling like I was so over reliant on Jared for my happiness, and I needed him around all the time. And I didn't have any hobbies of my own or friends of my own, because I was like, I'm just gonna leech off of him for everything that I need. But the beauty is, as I started to learn to love myself, I actually didn't feel this desperate need for his love and attention anymore. And our relationship improved so much, because then it was like, oh, I don't need him. I want him. But I like,
Mm.
that's powerful. That's powerful, like, learning how to be secure enough within yourself that you actually want to be around someone and not that you need them. Because that desperation doesn't say anything about them, right? All it says is that you are having a problem that you don't know how to deal with, right? And so, yeah, so this type of work has just been the most powerful thing I've ever done, and I've tried like a million things when when it comes to anxiety. So I love this.
Yeah, and have you
Um,
ever noticed, like, when somebody gives you a compliment, it feels good, but it fades away,
Fast, yeah.
you
Or
know?
you
But
feel like you can't even take it. Some people are like, they can't
yes,
even
yeah,
accept it at all.
yeah, and but then as you're doing the inner work of loving yourself, then that is so much deeper and more understanding. Because, like, if you called your mom to talk you through it, you would go like, "Okay, thank you, mom," like, if you could accept it, but then it would fade away and you would need it again. And so just like
Yeah.
what you're saying there, when you get it from the inside, that is more that's more lasting. That's where the healing is.
That's
And
the permanent healing of the childhood
yes.
trauma. That's where it permanently heals.
Yeah. And Morgan, I forgot a couple of steps. And so let
Yeah,
me
yeah,
just
go ahead.
finish up. Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, when okay, so I just want to play, you know, instead of watching you guys run off into the sunset and play, watch yourself play with your younger self, and then gather all of the the ages. Gather that 5-year-old, or if there's any other age that you're like, I also felt this way at age 15 and 18. Gather those in, like, wrap your arms around them in your head and bring them into your heart. And then have that, a 5-year-old is shorter than you, right? And so then just watch that 5-year-old grow up inside of you, like, take the present form inside of you. But that's integrating those ages into you, so then that love that you gave to them is now inside of you, which this is a powerful statement of that. I'm giving it to myself now. I am receiving it as if it had been given then.
Oh, wow. So, essentially what you're doing is you're permanently healing the emotional damage. It's like you're rewriting the story. You're going back and saying to, like, five-year-old Morgan, like, "I'm so sorry your mom didn't give you what you needed. Here it is, and I want you to go live your life as if you always had that." That's,
Yeah.
like, so freeing,
Yeah.
right? And it's so real, like, I feel that, like, I feel that when I do that exercise, it feels like those things that used to haunt me, when I think about them, they don't haunt me anymore because I've rewritten the story, and how beautiful that I rewrote it by loving myself, you know? Like, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I wanna point out
Yeah.
this comment. It's tricky for me to get to that place of visualizing myself as a child and my emotions I wasn't able to process. Something that helps me is listening to music that speaks those emotions. I wanted to share that in case anyone else has the same difficulty. It is so hard. Yeah, I just want to point out that, like, this process is simple, but it's extremely difficult. You will feel very resistant. Let me tell you how little Morgan was the first time I tried to talk to her. I don't trust you. I'm angry at you. She was mad at me. So yeah, we had some work to do. Like, I had to be very, very patient, and I didn't want to be because it's so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable being kind to yourself. It's very uncomfortable because we're not used to it. And so it's one of those things where you just have to keep coming back to. I love the way Russell Kennedy puts it in that same book. I'm going to love myself no matter what I've done, no matter what I've thought, no matter what I've said. Okay. And that's what I try to tell myself when I feel a lot of resistance toward me trying to soothe myself or help myself or work through something from the past is like, I'm going to be here for you, Morgan, even though you don't want it, even though you're mad at me, even though whatever, you know? And so, yeah, it is really, really hard. But yeah, you can just take it little by little. And like you said, if you can listen to music, that's a great way of unlocking some of those emotions. But it does get easier and easier. And then it's cool because you get to a point where it's just like, that little Morgan is a lot more open and receptive, and you can kind of get to the bottom of it a little bit faster and feel like it's resolving so much smoother Like, it's really, really cool.
Yeah, and it can be like learning another language. Like, I've had clients who are like, I just can't visualize, and I get that.
Yeah.
Because different people, like some people it's going to be more words than a picture or a feeling. Or
Yeah.
like if people have a hard time putting feelings to words, I'll say, okay, tell me what color comes to mind. Just like when I was younger, I felt gray. Okay, valid. Give that younger self a hug. So you can really simplify that. And then but then like the clients who have had trouble visualizing, and as you practice, learn the new language, it gets easier and easier to do. But I love the idea of the music, as long as when you're taking it to a place of healing, rather than I'm angry, I'm going to listen to angry music, and now I'm still angry. That would be like a, don't, it's going to be productive that you're hearing yourself, but then understanding that you're moving toward healing, right? Which music is so healing. So grateful for music.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, in conjunction with tips and ideas for healing unresolved childhood trauma, someone commented journaling is really helpful, and I had that on my list as well. Um, and it's not just about, stuff from the past, but stuff from the present too, right now. Is like if you can start to treat yourself like someone, like a friend, that is that's the kind of steps you wanna take. I was working, with a client recently, and I she had listed everything that was upsetting her, and then what I said, "Okay, if you were talking to a good friend of yours and they told you all those things, what would you say to that friend?" And she said, "I would say ABC." And I said, "Okay, how do you feel when you try to say those things to yourself?" And she was like, "No." And it was cool because we were like, "Okay, here's where the problem is, like, you don't feel like you can receive what it is that you need because that advice you gave was great, but the block there is, like, I don't feel worthy of receiving this sympathy, I don't feel worthy of receiving this love," or whatever. And so just even having that conversation with yourself, like, "I'm having a hard time because of ABC." Imagining you're someone else, what would you say to that person? And then what blocks come up for you, and try to understand why this is so hard for you. And this will kind of help you to piece things together and get to a point where you can validate those feelings, because that's what you need. When you're having a hard time, you need to validate your emotions. That's going to offload so much pain and so much urgency and so much need to get things done and need to accomplish things. If you can just validate that pain, you can soothe yourself in a healthy way, and then you won't feel all of this intensity around trying to soothe yourself in unhealthy ways.
Nicely said, Morgan.
Oh, yeah. So I am just looking here at what we've got time to talk about still. I wanna point out that, again, trying to learn to love yourself is extremely awkward and uncomfortable, and that any way you can try to do it in baby steps, and, like, get creative. Like, if I was trying to do something nice for a friend, what would I do, you know? And what
Yeah.
do I feel like I could maybe receive, you know? And it could be something small, like maybe I would just buy myself a pair of slippers or something, just like just trying to start to do something nice for yourself. It's really, really hard, but the more you do it, the more you'll break through those blocks and those walls. Um, MB said, Lady Gaga, Hold My Hand is such a good one for loving your younger self.
Mhm.
Oh, good.
Oh, nice.
Oh, and Gary said, "Hell yeah to that." Okay. Um, I want to share kind of some recent ahas I've had about this specifically. And I I okay, so it was a little while back. We all got really sick, and when we got really sick, it was like we were really sick. The whole house was down. And I was trying, and I was the least sick, but I was still sick. And I was trying to take care of everybody because everyone else was a lot more sick than me. And I was feeling really depressed. And I was like, why am I feeling so depressed? And the more I thought about it, the more I was realizing, in part, I was feeling really depressed because I felt like I couldn't do those normal things that I usually do in my routine, right? And there is some amount of safety in routine, and that makes sense. But I was like, I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to feel like upset that I wasn't able to mop the floors today because I was too busy cleaning up Jared's puke, you know? I want to just be glad that we're all, alive and that eventually this will be over, right? And I was I was thinking about that, and in conjunction with that, there was okay, this is kind of combined with another aha where I was having this argument with my husband, and he ended up saying to me, "It's like you think I don't like you." And it broke something in my brain where I was like, I realized the argument we were having was because I was looking for reassurance that he has already given me, right? That I didn't really need. And these things combined kind of got me thinking, okay, I got to love myself deeper. There's too much attachment to getting things done and too much attachment to other people and expecting things from other people. I need to love myself deeper. So I started reading that book, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It again, which I love. And in that book, he challenges you to do a self love meditation. And I thought, oh, I'm so good at self love. This is going to be great. And I was, I enjoyed it for 2 days. And then I was very resistant to it. And it's very simple, right? It's just like 7 minutes, you sit, you listen to music. Instead of meditating, you're actually trying to give yourself love. You're like trying to just imagine just giving yourself genuine love. Like, just like if you're holding a baby and loving that baby, like, oh, just like that, but for yourself, right? And so I started doing that exercise, and I started doing it every day and a couple times a day when I could. And I was just dealing with the blocks as they came up. But what I started to understand was that so much of my attachment to, like, that argument I had with Jared and feeling like I was so upset when I couldn't get things done was me feeling like I wasn't good enough. And I was trying to prove it through external means, prove it through Jared's actions, or prove it through my own actions of cleaning or whatever. And I was like, I am tired of feeling this way. I want to feel good about myself, whether or not, like, Jared, does whatever he does, whether or not I do the dishes or not, I want to feel good about myself. So I was doing this exercise, and I was telling my friend about it, and she's like, "Oh, so you're kind of like complimenting yourself." And I was like, "Actually, no. Compliments feel really conditional to me right now." Because for so long, my shame was so heavy and so intense that I didn't know how to cope with it. So I learned to cope with it through complimenting myself on doing a good job, right? Oh, I did a good job with the dishes today. Okay. And that was good. That was a good first step, right? Instead of I did the dishes but it wasn't good enough, right? That was a good first step, but it was still really conditional. And I was like, I didn't like that. I was like, no, it's just like, no, you just love yourself. You just do it. You don't compliment yourself, you just love yourself. And I was thinking about it with my kids, because your kids, you don't love them because they're productive. You don't love them because they're smart. You don't love them because they're funny. You don't, you can like those things about them, but that's not why you love them. And the purest form of love that I could think of with that is that you just love them because they're yours. And I was like, well, I'm mine too. So why can't I just love me for me? And it was really, really powerful. And what I've noticed as I've been doing that exercise really actively for a while now is that I just feel way more secure in myself. And the thing that probably blew my mind the most was so much of my urgency went away. I used to feel so much urgency where I was just running around all the time, feeling anxious all the time, and it was better than what it had been, but it's never been this good. And I realized so much of that urgency was me trying to combat my own shame. Because at the end of the day, I know I'm going to feel bad about myself if I don't get ABC done. And now it's like I'm floating on this cloud of self love of like, I'd like to get ABC done, but let's see how it plays out, you know? And I'm gonna be here for myself and I'm not gonna be hard on myself because if I can't get ABC done, there's probably a good reason. There was probably something better that came up, or I felt sick, or whatever. A perfect example of this was I I had planned on doing a video one day with my channel, and normally when I get all prepped to do a video and stuff, I feel a lot of like pressure and anxiety around it. And then I ended up getting a lot of brain fog, which happens sometimes with my chronic health issues. And the brain fog was like severe. I was like, I cannot think straight. There's no way I could do this video. And normally I'd be like, I gotta figure out a way to get the brain fog to go away so I can do the video. And like, I gotta like drink a bunch of electrolytes to try to fix this. And instead, I could just feel this smooth, like warm blanket inside of me that was like, you got brain fog. It happens. Videos next week. And that blew my mind. And I feel like that was all a result of just so many of those self-love exercises helping to heal that wounding that's causing that urgency, that's causing that pressure, that's causing that need to prove myself. So yeah, I've been really excited to share that because that was pretty freaking cool.
That is awesome, Morgan. Love it. Powerful.
I think oftentimes we're scared to love ourselves and be kind to ourselves because we're scared of what we're gonna do if we love ourselves. We're scared we're gonna let ourselves, if I'm too nice to myself, I'll never clean again.
Mm-hmm.
That's the fear,
Yeah.
right? The fear
Yeah.
is I shouldn't love myself too much or I might fly off the handle. But what I'm noticing is that I just don't think there is loving yourself too much. Like you can make like there's a difference between loving yourself and making excuses, right? But I think genuine love doesn't involve excuses, right?
Yeah.
It's genuine compassion. There's a line between compassion and making excuses, and I feel like it's pretty clear where that line is.
Nice.
So yeah, if you're tired of being a slave to your chores, just love yourself more. And yeah, I'm very, very excited for all that I have learned that has brought me to this point. Oh, couple good quotes to before we wrap up here from that same Anxiety RX book. There is no there is no treatment, vitamin regimen, workshop, book, medication, drug, addiction, or person or label or achievement that is going to heal you. You have to heal you. You do that by minimizing separation from yourself. Again, pulling out this quote for a second. If childhood trauma is a result of your parents not treating you well, so you learned not to love yourself and you learned to feel unworthy, then you repair that by relearning to love yourself. So, continuing the quote, you have to heal you. You do that by minimizing separation from yourself because the real truth is you can't leave yourself anyway. You are innocent love and consciousness at your essence. And the only thing that can separate you from that is your own perception. And as hard as it may be for you to believe, you do love yourself. You always have had love for yourself, but your psyche has blocked it. It's time to remove those blocks to loving yourself and find connection and faith in your true innocent self. And then one more quote from that book. If all anxiety is separation anxiety, which is a common quote amongst a lot of psychologists as far as anxiety goes, if all anxiety is separation anxiety and all alarms are separation alarms, then as you cultivate compassion, love, and gratitude for yourself, you heal the separation. And when the separation heals, the alarm disappears. And as the alarm disappears, the anxious thoughts go with it.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yay! Well, thank you to everyone who was watching this. Karen, let people know how they can get in touch with you if they would like to work with you or get in contact with you.
Yeah, I'm assuming you're gonna have the link?
Yep. I've got
Okay,
that email you gave me and the website
and the
as well.
website link. Okay, so one of the modalities that I do that I absolutely love is a program called Rise 7 Steps to a Happy, More Powerful Me. And I feel like if I were to sum up this program, the program helps you be more you than you've ever been before. And, we've got topics through each session that we work on that I love that approach. I love the, what's on your mind approach. Let's talk about that. And I also love the we're going to talk about this, and the next one builds on it, and the next one builds on it, because it's maybe something you didn't think about, but it is affecting you. And so it's a fantastic program. It's 18 sessions. And if you mentioned that you heard about this through Morgan's channel, I'll give you $100 off. And you deserve to be able to love yourself. You deserve to learn to love yourself. And so wherever you get the tools for that, just jump on it. Jump on the opportunity to have more love in your life.
And I'll quote you in saying, "There's no good reason not to love yourself." And there's no better day to start learning how than today. Oh, thanks
Yeah.
to everyone who watched. Thanks to all the awesome comments that we got. And thanks to Karen for talking with me about this. I absolutely love talking to you about anything, but especially this stuff.
Thank you, Morgan. I love talking with you too.
Awesome. All right, everyone have a great night, and I'll see y'all in a couple weeks. Bye.
Bye.